And it looks like we're live on YouTube as well. So thank you all for joining us. There are some people asking for the YouTube link, so I'm just working on getting that out here. Okay. All right, if you have questions, please feel free to start submitting them. I have one question here ready to go, and I'm just waiting for more. You can submit your questions either on YouTube, putting them in the comments, and hopefully I can see them. On Facebook, you can put them right in the comments. You can email or text me, and I will be able to get those as well. So got a lot of things running here. We want to make sure that it's running smoothly. All right. If anyone has questions, please start writing them down. Again, you can email or okay, got an email here. Okay. Once again, if you're just joining us, please start submitting your questions, and we'll be answering those shortly here. We're just waiting for some more people to get online. We're trying YouTube Live for the first time. Those of you on YouTube right now, I see we have a few viewers. Can you write something in the comments? Let's see what it would look like here in the live chat. Just say hello, make sure that we know how it works. Okay. Anybody there watching YouTube? Hi, Rita. That was on Facebook. I'm looking for somebody to make a comment. I sent the link earlier. If you're trying to use it, you have to use it. Up, Sarah. There you go. Thank you, Sarah, for doing that. Okay, it looks like we're up and running, so I'm going to start answering questions. I only have one question on deck right now, so if you would, please submit your questions so that I can have some going. We have the questions constantly going there. So anyway, let's start answering the questions. The first one I received is, what is the difference between what we call in Arabic, the Roman Catholic, which is not different than, it's not the same as what we call Roman Catholic. What they mean by Roman Catholic, Rum Catholique, in Arabic is actually the Melkite Church, what we call the Melkite in English. What is the difference between them and the Orthodox Church? For those of you who have never heard of the Melkite Church, if you walk into a Melkite church, it looks Orthodox. It has the same church structure. It has the same like iconostas, the same liturgy of St. John Chrysostom, and everything looks like you walked into an Orthodox church. So what's the difference? The difference is they are under the Pope of Rome. They're under the Roman Catholic Church. So the Melkite Church, which became popular a couple hundred years ago in the Middle East, is really under the Roman Catholic Church. So how did this happen? I don't know all the details from the history, but I do know this: the Orthodox Church in the Middle East was under attack, as they usually are over there, and they didn't have anywhere to send young men to study for the priesthood. So what they did was the Roman Catholic Church offered to educate a few of its young men. So they took 3 young men to Rome to be educated in the faith. Well, when they took them, they said, you know what, go back to the Middle East and bring people over to Rome. We'll let you keep your same liturgy. We'll let you keep your same practices. We'll even let you say the creed the way you've been saying it, but you'll be under Rome. If you do that, we'll offer you protection, food, schooling, all these different things. So that was how the church started. Now, the Melkite Church since then, they do some things that have not been very honest. So, for example, in the Orthodox Church, it's illegal for first cousins to get married to each other, right? Makes sense. That's a rule in the church as a canon. You have to have a certain amount of separation before you can marry somebody. So first cousins are not allowed to get married in the Orthodox Church. Well, let's say you had first cousins in the Middle East who wanted to get married. What they would do is go to the Melkite Church and say the Orthodox Church won't marry us. And the Melkite priest would say, well, then come on, we'll marry you in the Melkite Church, but you come and bring your whole family. That means aunts, uncles, cousins, bring everybody over, and we'll not only marry you, we'll offer you protection from Rome, we'll offer you free schools, food, water, all these different things. So a lot of people started leaving the Orthodox Church and joining on to the Melkite Church, which is really a Byzantine rite of the Roman Catholic Church. So why is this dangerous? There are a lot of things that the priest says that the people don't understand because it's theology. And theology is hard to understand if you don't have a theological training, a theological mind. So what happens is we have we have all these questions coming in now. I'm losing my train of thought. So the Orthodox Church teaches theology a certain way, right? It's ancient. It's unchanged since the time of Christ, the teachings of the disciples and the apostles. And the Roman Catholic Church doesn't believe the same things as the Orthodox Church. So what they really did was they offered something that would look identical to the Orthodox people, but what they were just doing is stealing parishioners from the Orthodox. So why would you take the Orthodox Christians and take away their take people away from the church that's been there for so long? Well, there's been a rivalry for over 1,000 years with the Roman Catholic Church, and it started even before the Great Schism. But this was a way for the Roman Catholic Church to come steal Orthodox Christians, which was not good. What it ended up doing was weakening Christianity in the Middle East. And then when the Protestant churches came into the Middle East, they weakened Christianity even more. There was one time our patriarch Ignatius was here in America to visit his flock here. This was, I think, I want to say 1999. And they had a meeting with him with all different Christian leaders from all different denominations. And this was in Chicago, I believe. And they asked him, what can we do to help Christianity in the Middle East? And Patriarch Ignatius's response was, if you want to help, stay out. And he wasn't saying that to be mean. What he meant was all these different Christian groups were coming into the Middle East in the name of spreading Christianity. But what they were doing was they weren't evangelizing the Muslims, because it was dangerous to do that. You would be killed by the Muslims to try and evangelize. What they were doing to survive was stealing Christians, and all the original Christians in the Middle East were the Orthodox Christians. So they started stealing Christians from other Christians, mainly the Orthodox. And the best way that the Roman Catholic Church was able to do that was to give them their exact replica of the Orthodox Church, but with fewer rules, so that people who didn't understand any better could do whatever they wanted. And that's how the Melkite Church was created. It was really just a way to steal Orthodox Christians and bring them over under the Pope of Rome. So theologically, the Melkites are under the Roman Church, which means they believe the same things as the Roman Church. However, the Church of Rome has allowed them to keep some of their old practices. So it's a very confusing situation. It really doesn't make any sense. You should either be Orthodox or Catholic, Roman Catholic, depending on what you believe. But to have your foot in both worlds doesn't really make sense. The theology contradicts itself, and so it's just it was just a cheap ploy to steal Christians. So anyway, moving on to our next question. And I have somebody here who needs the link. So if you give me a second, I will try and send it to them. But I don't think I can run all these programs. So while I'm doing that, I'll start answering the next question. How close are the Orthodox churches in this country to unifying to one church in America, meaning all the ethnic backgrounds uniting under one new patriarch? Well, a few years ago, we could have said that we were kind of close to doing that, but as it turns out, we were actually further away than possible, than we thought. The problem is with the ecumenical patriarch of Constantinople. You know, back in the 90s, I can't remember the year off the top of my head right now, but we had a Metropolitan Philip and Archbishop Iakovos of the Greek Archdiocese had this big meeting with all the heads of the Orthodox churches in North America. And so we had all these heads of churches come together, and they met, and they really came up with an agreement of how a new church, one church with one leader would look like in North America. And they were ready to on it. And in fact, Metropolitan Philip at the time said, I will step down. I will step down, and I will have you, Archbishop Iakovos from the Greek Patriarchate, be the head bishop in America. So he would be not necessarily a patriarch yet, but he would be like an autocephalous head of the church. Well, when one of the bishops in that meeting told Patriarch Bartholomew, he hit the ceiling, and he stopped any talks of unifying all the churches in America. As a result, he also removed Archbishop Iakovos from power, from his leadership, which is very sad, because Archbishop Iakovos was a great archbishop who did many great things in America. And so he kind of split this, because Patriarch Bartholomew had this idea that we all have to be under Constantinople. And the Patriarch of Constantinople has this idea that all Orthodox churches outside of the ancient five patriarchates belong to him. So he believes that all churches in America belong to him. And that's not the understanding of the rest of the Orthodox world, obviously. So Patriarch Bartholomew, then years later, fast forward to, I want to say 2007, 2008, he wanted to do that same thing, unify all the churches, but he wants it to be under the Patriarch of Constantinople. So he started what we call the Episcopal Assembly, or the Assembly of Bishops. He had all the bishops in North America meeting for this one common goal of having one Orthodox church in America, and it's under the Patriarch of Constantinople. Well, no one else is buying that except for the Greeks. And that has really killed any effort to have one Orthodox church, because there's a lot theologically wrong with what the ecumenical patriarch is doing, trying to take over all the churches, all the ethnic churches here in America. Further, the ecumenical patriarch has acted several times in the past few years, making the schism in the Orthodox Church even wider. So you may or may not have heard about the situation in Ukraine. The Church of Ukraine was under the Patriarch of Moscow, and the ecumenical patriarch granted a group of them autocephaly to break away from Russia. So this was unheard of. It was unacceptable by the Patriarch of Constantinople, and as a result, he's created further divide, and he's really trying to be more like a pope in the Orthodox world, which is not Orthodox theology at all. So it'll be, to answer the original question, how close are the Orthodox churches in this country to unifying? Of course, that's all up to God. When God sees that it's time, he will do it. I think we're still quite a bit away. I'm not sure we'll even see it in my lifetime. Maybe towards the end of my lifetime, we'll see. But as of how things are going right now, we're very far away. There's a lot that needs to be worked out for one Orthodox church. Another question. Why don't we read an epistle during Orthros? So that's a good question. Orthros is really more of an Old Testament service. So the Divine Liturgy is more of a New Testament service. And that's why we read the epistle and the gospel, which are both New Testaments, in the Divine Liturgy, but not in Orthros. Orthros, we have a lot of Psalms. But sometimes we do read the gospel in Orthros. The only times we read the gospel in Orthros is on a Sunday and on a feast day, which for most people, most of you, those are the only times that you're in church for Orthros. Because in the parish, we don't generally have, unless it's a bigger parish with multiple priests, we don't really have daily Orthros. So that makes it hard to know what goes on in daily Orthros, but daily Orthros does not have a gospel or epistle because they are, again, more like Old Testament, and it's preparing for the liturgy, just like the Old Testament prepared us for the New Testament. So again, those festal Orthros and the gospel, Sunday Orthros, we have the gospel readings read, because they're festive, because they're about something that happened in the New Testament time, either celebrating a saint or celebrating a feast or celebrating the resurrection. So that's why we stick those in there. But the epistle really doesn't have a place in Orthros. Now, those of you who have been to the Antiochian village, they sometimes during daily Orthros read the epistle and the gospel. But those don't actually belong in Orthros. They have a special blessing to do that at the Antiochian village, because those are the ones that belong in liturgy, but the days that they don't have liturgy, they read those in Orthros, just so that the children over there get to hear them. We do the same in the conventions. So it's not the proper place to do it, but it's not a bad practice. If you're only having a daily Orthros, we stick to the epistle and gospel in there. So thank you for that question. We have some other questions here that I'm going to pull up on Facebook. Okay, so we have, let's see. When my daughter was born, why did she have to wait 40 days before she was able to enter the church? At the time, I was not baptized as an Orthodox Christian, so I never fully understood. Thank you, Adriana, for that question. It's a nice question. So there are practical reasons and spiritual reasons that we have a mother wait to come back to the church. And the waiting is partly for the child, but also partly for the mother. So when a woman gives birth, and especially think before modern medicine, it was probably even harder for a woman to recover after giving birth, because it's very traumatic to the body. So the church would give you 40 days to stay home. In the Old Testament, they not only gave you 40 days to stay home, the 40 days to stay home was if you had a boy. If you had a girl, you would wait 80 days. But those are some different rules, and there were different reasons for doing that. In the New Testament, we give 40 days. Why? Because one, Jesus waited until he was 40 days to come into the temple. And you can read that in the Gospel of Luke. So remember, when he came into the temple for the first time, he was brought in by his parents. He was brought in, entered by the arms of the righteous Simeon. And Simeon brought him in. That's why he said the famous prayer of Saint Simeon. Now thou art dismissing thy servant in peace, O Master, according to thy word. And we hear that prayer at Vespers, every Vesper service. So we have we have a 40-day period, one, to let the child grow and get a little stronger, two, to help let the mother recover a little bit. Now, I've had people ask me if they could bring the child in and if they themselves can come in before the 40 days. My general rule is, besides going to the doctor, the church should be the first place you go. So if you're going to Target or Walmart or out to eat before that 40 days, you might as well just come to the church and get a blessing and come in. The 40 days and the 80 days in the Old Testament were more for purification of the mother, because the Jews believed that blood was unclean. And so while the mother was still bleeding, they would have her wait before coming back to the church. But we don't have those rules anymore. That's not the reason we wait those 40 days. It's more that Christ did it. He was under the law and followed the law, even though he was the one that created the law. And so that's why we follow the churching after 40 days. And again, practically speaking, it's just a good time for the mother to rest and be home. So Julie on Facebook is asking about how the ecumenical patriarch originated. That's a good question. So there were originally 5 patriarchates. You had Rome, Constantinople. Of course, it wasn't Constantinople back then. Alexandria, Egypt, Antioch, and Jerusalem. Those were the 5 original patriarchates. Well, of course, we know at the Great Schism, Rome broke away. So you had then these other 4 patriarchates. But Rome was the first of the patriarchates. It was what you would have called the ecumenical patriarchate, or the first among equals. They called the Pope of Rome. Which all that meant was that he had certain responsibilities. So if they all met, he would maybe chair the meeting. He could call together an ecumenical gathering, although usually that would be done by an emperor. Okay. Also, if there was like a dispute in the church, let's say there was some kind of a challenge, ecclesiastical challenge, somebody could challenge the decision of their bishop to the ecumenical patriarch. But the Emperor Constantine, who we're going to celebrate in 2 days, we have liturgy for Constantine and Helen tomorrow. The Emperor Constantine moved the Roman Empire from Rome to what became Constantinople. It was named after him. And once that happened, it became New Rome, and it became the new capital of the world. And so the ecumenical patriarchate moved from Rome to Constantinople. Some people in more modern times have said, well, we should move the ecumenical patriarchate to Moscow, to Russia, which is, they would say, Third Rome, because it's kind of like the epicenter of Orthodoxy now. But others say it should be moved to Washington, D.C., because that's New Rome. So there is a lot of dispute about where the ecumenical patriarchate should be. Certainly, the Patriarchate of Constantinople does not have the most Orthodox Christians. We would say the Patriarch of Moscow in Russia does. But there's a lot of debate about that. One day, if we have a real holy council, maybe that's something that they'll talk about and reconsider. So, Lisa, you asked me why we no longer kneel for confession. I think you've asked me that at every Ask Abouna. The old kneeler is downstairs, just very quickly. I don't use it because I have a bad back. I can't listen to your confession while you're kneeling, or else I won't be able to stand up again. You can ask Dr. Ganem Howard to confirm that my back is very bad, and he'll tell you. I give you permission, Dr. Howard, to let people know that I have a bad back. So that's why we don't use the kneeler at confession, but also it's the Byzantine style to not be kneeling the entire time at confession. We sit down. That's more of the Russian style to kneel throughout the entire confession. I prefer to do it the Byzantine style, where we sit together and are able to talk. Okay, more questions here. Let's see. Okay. Also, when it comes to confession, how often do we have to confess, or is it based off of reaching out to the Father to confess? I'm not quite sure if my question makes sense. I do not know. I do know that it is not like the Catholics. Yeah, so it's a little different. And you kind of answered your own question. The best way to decide how often to go to confession is to ask your spiritual father, the priest that you go to confession to, usually your parish priest, unless you have special blessing to do otherwise. You should speak to your spiritual father, your parish priest, about how often you should go to confession. I've told my spiritual children at my church different things based on where they are in their spiritual life. I know when I was in seminary, I would go a lot more often, at least once a month, sometimes up to once a week. The more we go to confession, the more we're like attuned to our spiritual lives, the more we realize that we sin. And I'm not talking about big things, like people think sometimes if I didn't commit murder or adultery that, there's nothing to confess. So that's not true. It's the little things that really cause us to fall, right? How does cancer start? It starts as one rogue cell, and it builds and builds and builds until it becomes this deadly mass in us. And that's how sin is. It starts with little things. So the more we confess, the better. But in a parish our size, I would be crazy to tell every parishioner that you have to come to confession once a week. There's no way I can handle confessions like that. There are some parishioners that I tell them you should come minimum of 4 times a year. I think that's like the bare minimum we should do. I tell other parishioners who are more attuned to their spiritual lives, why don't you come once a month? It'd be better for you to come once a month. There are times that I want to follow up on a certain issue or sin, and so I might tell someone, come back in a week, and I'll hear your confession again in a week. I want to see how things are going. So it's really up to your spiritual father to be able to tell you how often to go. I like once a month. I think that's a good number. But again, every priest is going to be different. And do children have to confess, and at what age do they start? So yes, children should go to confession, but I generally don't have children come to confession before 7 or 8 years old. Sometimes maybe if they're having a hard time with something, or just in general to get them used to sitting with a priest, you may want to schedule a time with a priest to have the priest sit down with your kid and just talk and let them ask questions. That'll just get them used to it. But as a matter of fact, and this is kind of sad, but when a child dies, we don't do the regular funeral service, because the regular funeral service talks a lot about forgiveness of sins. We don't believe that a child actually sins until they're maybe 7, 8 years old, and they really know that what they're doing is bad. Do they do things that are bad when they're younger? Sure, but they don't really understand it. And so we consider them as innocent until that 7 or 8 years of age. If a child dies, which unfortunately sometimes it happens before then, they have a special funeral service that almost guarantees the child paradise. And it's a lot more beautiful, although God forbid, we don't like to bury our children, of course. But there's something beautiful about it. So at 7 or 8 years old, they should start having confession with a priest. But again, that's up to each spiritual father. Okay, we had another question here on text message. Let's see what we have. Why do different jurisdictions have different traditions for how they do the services? For example, the Greeks will rub a baby with oil completely at a baptism, while others don't do that. So thank you for that question. Yes, a couple of Abouna ago, I think somebody asked about different traditions and where they come from. So there are different types of traditions in the Orthodox Church. Remember, I said that there is dogma. Those are the most strict. To be Orthodox, you have to believe those dogmas 100%. So those are things like we believe in one God in three persons. We believe that Jesus Christ is God and man. He's fully God and fully man. We believe he was born of a virgin. Pretty much everything you hear in the creed, that's dogma. If you don't believe that, you're not Orthodox. Then you have doctrines of the church, which are still very serious. You have to believe in the doctrines of the church, but they're a little less necessary for our salvation than dogmas. So you have the doctrines. Then you have holy tradition, which are things found in like our iconography, our hymnography, the teachings of the saints and of the fathers of the church, the writings of the fathers. And then you have things like theologumena. Theologumena is a Greek word which means like theological opinion. So it's things that are good, but they're not necessarily dogma or doctrine or holy tradition or the fathers of the church, but it's good theological opinion. Some people within the Orthodox Church may vary a little bit here and there, but then you have the local traditions of things. And sometimes within our liturgical practices, remember, we live in a time, it's hard to imagine what life was like hundreds of years ago, but we live in a time where there's printing presses. It's very easy to buy books. So if I printed a liturgical book, everyone in the world could have it, right? That's not always how things were. So over time, it was like that game telephone. So if I whisper something in your ear, and by the time you whisper it to the 10th person, the story changes a little bit. Now, can you imagine starting with an Orthodox liturgy, a Christian liturgy, 2,000 years ago, and then it's based off of, what I saw and what I could remember over 2,000 years and over thousands of miles of distance between Russia and Greece and Asia Minor, which is modern-day Turkey, and Lebanon and Syria and Palestine and North Africa and all these different places that have Christianity. Imagine like playing telephone with all those different places. You're going to end up with some slightly different traditions. So even within the Antiochian Archdiocese here, and I get these questions a lot, even within our own Archdiocese, where we have the same book, the same Metropolitan, the same teachers, me and another priest are going to do things slightly different within the liturgy. Doesn't necessarily mean one is wrong, one is right. Even on Mount Athos, the holy mountain, two different monasteries do things slightly different. So it's a matter of, these are, again, small T traditions. So you have big T traditions that cannot be changed, and you have small T traditions that sometimes can be changed with the blessing of the hierarch. Another example of a small T tradition is, like I mentioned before, what color are your Easter eggs? The tradition of the church is to have red Easter eggs, as Saint Mary Magdalene explained the resurrection of Christ through an Easter egg. That's where we get that practice from. But then, like the Russians have those beautiful eggs that they decorate. Nowadays, we've gotten into different color eggs, yellow and green and all that. And that's something we kind of got from the West, which I'm not a big fan of. I like the red Easter eggs, but it's a small T tradition. Most likely, our salvation is not going to hang in the balance over what color our Easter eggs are. So that's where some different traditions come from. But that was a good question. Thank you. We're taking questions. We don't want to have too much time here without questions. But if you're watching on YouTube, we have YouTube Live working today. You can, in the live chat, submit your question on there. It'll pop up on my screen and I'll get it. My dad wrote a question, and I want to say hello to Samir Kanezi, who's one of my old parishioners from Indianapolis. But my father says, what's your father supposed to call you, father or son? So, that's always funny. People ask me, does your wife call you father at home? My immediate family, I'm talking my wife and my children and my parents, they don't call me father because I'm not their priest. So even though my wife and my children come to my church, I'm not their priest. They have their own spiritual father. When my daughter gets older, daughters get older, they're not going to want to come to confession to me. they're going to have another priest. So my kids call me Baba, which in Arabic means dad. My wife calls me by my name because I'm her husband, not her priest. And my parents, who I still honor as parents, as my parents, although my dad will probably tell you I don't always listen to everything he says, but that's okay. I have to honor them. I don't always have to be obedient to them. That's because I'm married now. I am the head of the household in my house, just like all the men out there are the head of their household, and I'm also the head of the church. But I still love my parents. I honor them, and they call me by the name that they gave me. Generally, the practice in the Orthodox Church is that the family of the priest they refer to the priest as father in public, out of respect for their husband or father or son. They still would call him father in public, but at home when we're private, they would refer to me by however they're used to referring to me before my ordination. So good question, Dad. Another question: what is the capacity of our church now? So Bishop Thomas, along with the guidelines of our governor, our metropolitan and archdiocese, this is with the consideration of many experts, the CDC, medical doctors especially who are Orthodox, who understand the way our services work, and hierarchs and spiritual people. And then our particular situation here in Charleston, looking at our local numbers for coronavirus cases and looking at the size and capacity of our church, Bishop Thomas has now deemed that we can have up to 80 people in church, 80. So far we've not hit that. The most we've had is 50. And if you've been to church during those days, having 50 people in church, our church still looks empty. We have a very big church. Our seating capacity just downstairs without the choir loft and without the altar is 410, according to the fire code. So our local governor has given us up to 50% seating capacity, saying every other pew. Our archdiocese has said up to 25% capacity, but using our wisdom here in the church, we've allowed, and so far people haven't needed more space, but right now we're up to 80 people in the church. So if you are interested in coming, we're still asking for people to sign up. The sign up is not only to control the number, but also if, God forbid, there is any kind of breakout of coronavirus, or we know that somebody in our parish has come down with it, we can alert you if you were in church that day that you might want to go get checked out or quarantine yourself. But as of right now, we're doing everything we can to be as safe as possible. We have a lot of policies in place. We are constantly cleaning things, sanitizing things. We have a wonderful new custodian. If you haven't met him, his name is Robert. He was in the military for years. He does a great job cleaning military style. We're requiring masks of everybody in the church, except for infants, of course. We don't have our choirs because of the aerosol effect, so we just have two chanters, one on either side of the church, far away from all the people. We only have one altar server. So a lot of things we are doing and again, we're talking to medical doctors as well, and epidemiologists and scientists, and so we're getting the best information to keep everybody safe. So it says over here, I know it's based off of each state, but when can we start resuming church when quarantine has been lifted? So Adriana, I believe you live in New York. That's up to your local authorities over there. Your priest will most likely contact you and your church community when it's time for you to go back to church. For us here in West Virginia, we've been back for a few weeks now, and we're just trying to keep everybody safe. It's as our Metropolitan Joseph has said on a number of occasions, we did not stop church out of fear, because the only thing we should fear is God alone. we're doing it out of love for each other, and we're trying to keep each other safe and healthy. If we think that we are able to withstand the coronavirus, we are being safe for those who are not able to. We're trying to keep our parents, our grandparents, our aunts and uncles safe. There are people who have the coronavirus and it's no worse than the flu. There are other people who don't have any symptoms at all. And there are some people who, of course, die. And there are some people who recover, but it's a very, very, very slow and painful recovery. So we're trying to avoid anyone getting sick. We thank our frontline workers who put their lives on the line. We've heard of several doctors and nurses dying while serving people. As a priest, sometimes I have to put myself in harm's way. If somebody is dying, I need to be there. Thank God we have not had any deaths in our parish because of the coronavirus. In fact, I only know of one case in our entire parish, but church had been closed for a long time before that, and the person is healthy. No one else in their family got it, and it's been a couple of months since they had it. So it's been safe in our community so far. Another question about how to receive Holy Communion within our Orthodox faith. Again, our bishops, scientists, doctors, Orthodox doctors, everybody have commented that we will continue to receive Holy Communion in the same way that we have been for thousands of years. And that is with the spoon, with one common spoon. It's impossible for anyone to get sick through Holy Communion. Holy Communion is the body and blood, the life-giving body and blood of Jesus Christ. There's no way that what the Holy Communion does is it sanctifies everything it touches. The fathers of the church talk about it as fire burning the unworthy. So what do you think it can do if it's physical and it can burn spiritual sin? What do you think it can do to physical coronavirus? It kills it. So when we take communion, don't worry. If you have faith that it's the body and blood of Christ, there's no way you can catch the coronavirus or any other illness from Holy Communion. And believe me, the priest is the last person to consume the chalice. We've never gotten sick from Holy Communion. I put the same spoon that's been in everyone's mouth in my mouth at the end of the liturgy, and I've never been sick from communion. If you don't have faith that it's the body and blood of Christ, then to be honest, and I know this is blunt, but you shouldn't even be taking communion. It's only for people who believe it's the body and blood of Christ. So thank you for that question. I have another question here. Okay. Since we have to keep 6 feet social distancing in church from each other, but yet we are right behind each other in communion line, I have to be honest and say I'm not sure I will feel comfortable taking communion after the person before me if he is infected with the virus and has had their breath on the communion spoon. I do remember the story you posted, but what do we do if we don't really think we want to follow someone in that condition? I want to hear your opinion, not just go by the story you posted. So again, that's based off of what I was just answering. By the way, in the communion line, because breathing on each other is how you get the infection. And I know the aerosol and the germs stay in the air for a little bit, but we're asking everyone in line. In fact, our red carpet leading up to communion is marked with blue tape for where you should stand. So I think there is 10 feet distance in between each person, each family, I'm sorry. So again, you can be with your immediate family because you're isolated with them at home. But we're keeping 10 feet distance in between one family and the next family, just like you do when you're waiting in line at a store. The difference is taking communion from the same spoon. Again, that spoon, once I put it in your mouth, and it's not touching your mouth, but let's say your breath touches the spoon, it's going back into the Holy Communion. Again, this is the body and blood of Christ. It destroys any kind of evil. It destroys sickness. It's the fountain of life. So I'm taking the spoon and putting it back in the fountain of life before giving it to the next person. Again, I've never been sick. I've had people with very contagious things take communion, and I take the communion right after it. When I commune somebody at home, they're home because they're sick, I put the communion in their mouth. They take the communion off of it, and to clean it, I put it in my own mouth. So this is the body and blood of Christ. Nobody's ever gotten sick from it. We're not going to start now. So I hope that answers your question there. Do we have any other questions over here? Let's see. There's some emails here. Okay. I had a question if the church was hanging in there. We are hanging in there. We are strong as ever. We're praying for one another. It's a beautiful thing to see all of us coming together, serving each other, asking about each other. It's really nice. Okay, another question. Because each church is different, how do you decide on a sermon? That's a great question. Sometimes I don't even know. Honest to God, sometimes I give a sermon and I think to myself, that didn't make any sense. And then I have people come to me at the end of liturgy and say, thank you so much for that sermon. It was just what I needed to hear. And they'll be in tears saying, you just changed my life with the sermon. Like, I have no idea what I said. Please tell me, because I don't get it. We really believe, and the priest, when he's preparing for a sermon, prays that God speaks through him to be what the people need to hear. So we hopefully are preparing ourselves so that the Holy Spirit is speaking through us. Now, we don't just leave it to chance. We do our research. We read, we pray, we think. At the beginning of the week, I usually read the Epistle and the Gospel and just let them kind of marinate in my heart until the end of the week, where I can, and then I might look up some of the things that the fathers have said about those passages. Or I might consider if there's a major feast coming up, or if we're celebrating a major feast or a major saint. And then as the pastor of the community, I know my people, I know their struggles, both through conversations, through confessions. And be careful now, I don't talk about anyone's confession in general. If you feel like I'm talking about you in a sermon, it's because many, many people struggle with the same thing, probably even myself. I remember before the first sermon I gave years ago, 18 years ago, I called a priest and I asked him, it was a priest it was actually Father Michael Nasser, who a lot of you know from the Antiochian village. And I used to love his sermons. I said, Father, how do you give a sermon? Give me some advice. And the first thing he said to me is, when we preach first and foremost to ourselves. So sometimes if you are listening to my sermon and you say, Father, that sounded very judgmental, why are you saying that? Know that, first of all, I'm talking to myself. I don't exempt myself from the sermon. In fact, most of the time, I say, we have to do something, because I am talking to myself, and it's important to know that. So whenever I'm preaching, it's something that maybe I'm struggling with, something I know that a majority, or at least a large number of you are struggling with. And then, people have told me, Father, I like your sermons. You should post them online. I don't like to post my sermons online because my sermons are for my parishioners. They're for my people, because I am their shepherd. And so I have a specific message for them. There have even been times when I have to admonish my flock, and I ask for the live streaming to be turned off, because it's only for my flock. It's an internal matter. It's like, as a father, I don't take my children outside to yell at them and embarrass them. I do it inside my own home, because as the father, it's my job to discipline my children. So I do the same with my parish. I know this is not a very accepted thing in our American society, right? People don't want to be told what to do and what not to do. But it's important, as Orthodox Christians, we look to our priest to guide us, to shepherd us. The shepherd has a staff in his hand. That staff is not just for walking. It says in the enthronement prayers of a bishop that the staff is also for disciplining the disobedient, right? So we don't have a physical stick that we hit you with, but with our words sometimes. Our words have to be harsh, just like Jesus Christ's words were harsh. just like the saints' words were harsh. So these are all reasons why the priest sometimes is hard on his people. It's because he loves them. Let's see here. Okay, what does the church's stance on those individuals who have not been exposed to the word? Can they be saved if they did not lead a life believing in the word of God? For an example, extreme example, an uncontacted Amazonian tribe with no outside contact. Or how about those who lived before the time of Jesus? Okay, so the people who lived before the time of Jesus, they're in a whole different situation. They all went to Hades, not hell, but to Hades when they died. And we see that in the icon of the resurrection. Actually, if you go to our Facebook page, I posted a beautiful video from last night of a priest explaining different icons. And he's one of my good friends. We went to school together, and he's a priest in New York City. And he talks about the icon of the resurrection in Christ's descent to Hades, right? And everybody went to Hades. Even John the Baptist, who was the holiest man born of woman, was down there, and a lot of the ancient prophets. So a lot of people were in Hades before. Everyone went to Hades. Then Christ took people up to heaven. But how about that remote person in a tribe in Africa or in the Amazon or Indonesia or whatever that have never even heard of Christianity? We don't have a dogma or a doctrine on this. There's somewhere in the Bible, and I can't pinpoint it right now, and I can't even quote it directly, but to some effect, it says something like those people will be judged based on the law written on their heart. You know, God writes his law in our hearts. So whether or not we've heard of the word, we've heard the laws of Moses or of Christ, we have the law written on our heart. That's number one. Number two, people will be judged on what they're taught. But we also have a difficult saying from our Lord Jesus Christ himself, saying you can only enter the kingdom of heaven if you are reborn of water and the Spirit. But we also know that that's happened in different ways. There have been martyrs who were not baptized. How were they baptized? They were baptized by their own blood. So they were baptized literally by their own blood. There was Saint Tekla, who was baptized by God himself when she was thrown into an aquarium to be martyred and fed to sharks and other sea creatures. So she was baptized in a different way. So we don't always know how somebody is baptized. But I always tell people when they ask this question that I think the harsher judgment is going to come on us, the Christians, for not having gotten that word out to all the people. It is our job as Christians to spread the word to all the people of the world. Our Lord has given us this duty. He said, go therefore and preach the gospel to all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So if we're not doing that, the judgment is on us, not so much the people who are living in those jungles or wherever. By the way, we have a beautiful presence in Africa, in Kenya, in Nigeria, in Uganda. There's a beautiful Orthodox presence down there. If you go online, go on YouTube, you can even look up Orthodox Church in Africa. And there are so many beautiful churches. They're under the patriarch of Alexandria, which is in Egypt. And again, very beautiful. And their expression of orthodoxy, again, they're small T traditions, which we talked about earlier. They vary a little bit. So just so many beautiful minor traditions that we have in different churches. Lisa, thank you. I'm blessed that I'm also here at St. George. Thank you for your comment. So if there are any other questions, I'll take probably one more question before we have to sign off for the night. By the way, we have our new intern, David. He's here for the summer to help us out. He's doing all kinds of things, working behind the scenes. He's going to have a book club for any of you who are interested. The book is called The Guru, the Young Man, and something. I can't remember the end of it. But if you're interested in that, email him assistant@stgeorgecharleston.org. org. He's going to be starting that book club soon. I think he's responded to a few of you now who were interested in that. We have only a couple copies in our bookstore, so you can buy it from the church, pick it up from the church, or else you can order it Amazon, I don't know, wherever you get your books. I'm sure there are a lot of copies. It's on the life of Saint Paisios, but if you're interested in it, you're going to do about 30 pages a week over 10 weeks, and we're lucky that David is going to do that. Saint Paisios, by the way, great saint. Our own Metropolitan Joseph has had encounters with him when he used to go visit Mount Athos as a young deacon. So it's a great question. Okay, my daughter asked me a question on FaceTime. She's not currently with me, and I'm rephrasing what she has said. Why do you have a long beard and our father does not? Does it mean anything? Well, traditionally, Orthodox priests have beards, and they have long beards. Your priest, I happen to know, does not, because for one thing, he used to be in the military, and he could not have a beard in the military, but he's also a medical doctor, and so probably, I know he does surgeries and things like that, so he probably is not able to have a beard because he performs surgeries. It's the Orthodox tradition for the priest to have a beard. One, it's a sign, it was actually something that all married men in more traditional times and in like traditional Christianity, all married men have beards. It's a Middle Eastern tradition, especially among the Palestinians, that the day before the wedding, they have a shaving party where everyone, all the family come and they shave the groom for the last time because it was expected that after that he would grow a beard as a sign of his manhood and that he was married. So the priest also, being married not only to a wife but to the church, grows a beard, and we let our beards grow as a sign that we don't care about worldly things. Now I keep it somewhat trimmed. My mom doesn't think so. She'd like it to see it trimmed a lot more. But we keep it somewhat trimmed just because we're dealing with the world. The monks, like when you see the monks come to our church, they never ever trim their beard. And in fact, monasteries don't even have mirrors. So you wouldn't find a mirror in a monastery, even in the bathrooms, because they just don't care about their appearance. They're focused all on their spiritual lives and not on their bodies. We also do it so that, you know, if I was to take off my cassock and put on regular clothes, I should feel out of place. I should look out of place. And so that's why I feel like an Orthodox priest should always look out of place in the world, because we're in the world but not of the world. So we should always look like we are preaching Christianity wherever we go, even with my beard, even with my clothes, but especially, hopefully, with my actions. So thank you for all the questions. We had a great session today. We'll see you next week for Ask Abouna. It'll most likely be Tuesday. I have not posted next week's schedule yet for Divine Liturgies because we're waiting to hear from the Archdiocese on how they want us to do the leaf taking of Pascha. But leave next week's schedule a little empty. We may be celebrating the leaf taking of Pascha. That's the last day that we say Christ is risen. We may be celebrating it the same way that we celebrate Pascha. So we might be doing the holy fire and everything. So be ready for that. We'll see how that goes. But until then, we hope to see you. We have liturgy tomorrow. We still have a lot of open spots tomorrow evening for Saints Constantine and Helen. Great saints. Our seminarian David is going to preach. So you might want to come and hear that or else watch us online. Tomorrow we will be doing our live streaming on YouTube only. So Facebook viewers, we are not going to live stream on Facebook, only on YouTube. This is a new channel. So please go to our YouTube channel. I believe it's St. George. If you search St. George Charleston or St. George Cathedral in Charleston, you should be able to find it, subscribe to it. That way you'll always get notifications before we go live or whenever there's a new video. But so tomorrow we'll only live stream on YouTube. The YouTube link is going to be going on our website. I think we're going to try and get away from the iframe. We're having some issues with that. So join us tomorrow night for liturgy. If you're able to come, please email or text or call me and let me know. We'll put your name on the list. Also the same for Saturday night Vespers, Sunday morning Orthros and liturgy. We love to see you. If you're not able to come, please keep joining us online on our YouTube channel. God bless you and have a wonderful and peaceful night.